Sir, before we start, a warm welcome to our audiences here. I hope many of us then will be joining us soon. There was a small technical glitch. So
No problem. You tell me when you want to start. It's fine with me.
Yes, sir. So before we start, I'd like to introduce our speaker today. He's Dr. Waiel Awwad. He's a fellow of Centro Studi Internazionali, Rome, Italy. He's a 2018 Freedom of Speech Award winner, awarded by the International Association of Press Club. He's the president of the Foreign Correspondents Club of South Asia from 2003 to 2005 and 2013 to 2015. He was detained in Afghanistan before the fall of Taliban and captured in ambush while he was embedded with the US Marine Corps in 2003 during the Iraqi invasion. He is a well-known war reporter, having covered Sri Lanka, Kashmir, Afghanistan, West Asia, and Gulf region. He has been the chief and has led bureaus of several media houses, including Middle Eastern Broadcasting Center in London, Al Arabiya in Dubai. He has reported and worked in bureaus in Kuwait, Oman, Damascus Radio, and is a frequent contributor in print and TV media and outlets around the world. He has also contributed chapters to academic books on Middle East, West Asia, and Arab affairs. Sir, the time is all yours. You can go ahead with the presentation. And thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this important meeting to discuss the Arab Middle East affair. And I'm happy to be part of your successful events, which I have been witnessing on the website. So my topic today is on the Middle East, the past and the future. First of all, the Middle East, I would say that we do not call it the Middle East in India. Being in India, I would say that we are more of presenting the Indian point of view, because India look at it not from the colonial power point of view. India sees the things from the what we call India see it from the eyes of non-colonial. So that's why it's called West Asia. But in the Arab country, I'll try to share with you my slides now, and I will be 1 second. I think we need to click on the sharing. This, 1 second. This is the screen. All right, and here I am. Am I on the right track? Am I doing the correct thing?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's perfect. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Now, this is my objective of this paper is to bring to notice the plight of the Arab world, rise of political Islam, terrorism, Al-Qaeda during the post-pandemic, and folly of the external intervention, plus the implication of the expectation of what could be next. So I think the current situation in turmoil in West Asia is nothing to do but the manifestation of the Western policy, and which has been there, and the thirst for the natural resources in the Arab world. In fact, it has never been ending saga for most of the Arab countries, and that's why we see after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, that is the first World War I. There was a agreement between the Arab and the French and the British to join them to defeat the Ottoman Empire and promise us independence. But the fact of the matter was that Arab never gained independence. But being a part of the Syria myself and part of the Mesopotamia, where I am a Mesopotamist, I would like to bring a little bit sharing of our history, which was flourishing, and all the civilization have come up from the Mesopotamia, which have contributed to Greek and then to Roman, and from the Roman travel to Europe. So our link with the European, with Asia, with the world has been throughout history, throughout contribution to civilization. But during the 19th century and after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, we were promised, as I said, to gain independence, but somehow we were divided into 19 states by the Sykes Picot, the French and the British generals, and the USSR at that time was part of the same plan. But then the Soviet Union, Caesar came, and the Soviet Union took over from the Caesar Russia, and then it has only then divided among the British and the French. That was the original plan of 1916, 1917 of the French. You can see the Mediterranean Sea, where the French mandate was there and the Russian mandate plus the British mandate. But simultaneously, it was divided. And you can see the British link of Iraq, Baghdad, Damascus, and Haifa to Palestine, Israel, and access to the sea. So from the Persian Gulf into the Mediterranean Sea, because to save their own interest from India. So this was the initial plan, and then that was have taken over as the final plan, and where they have created Transjordan, and Palestine was under the mandate of the British, where they promised the Israelis Balfour Declaration, a state for the Jewish inside Palestine, which is now current Israel, and left whatever left is 12% or 20% of it is Palestine. I have to bring this back a little fast in history to understand the current situation, because as I said, it's whatever you are seeing now is a manifestation of 100 years of suffering of the Arab world and the hand of the occupied forces. So therefore, post Second World War, we have seen lots of changes in the Arab world. In fact, there was a huge independent waves, and the people pan-Arabic movement was there. Palestine was divided into Israel part, and the 1947 UN Security Council resolution 181, and then it given the Palestinian state and the Israeli state, but it was only the Israeli which has been there. And then the Arab had felt that they had been betrayed by the international community and never went to peace with Israel on these issues. So there was a pan-Arabic movement that time, where the Arab world was very much keen on the getting back Palestine and giving the Palestinians their right to exist in their own homeland. But I've seen this period at around the same time. It was the British who have given the monarchy of Saudi Arabia to the Al Saud family, in the one condition that they should continue by the way of the Wahhabi doctrine as their the Wahhabi movement as their way of Islam. So there was a movement that to Islamize the whole Arab countries by the Wahhabi doctrine and avoid the transformation of the Arab countries into what we call the socialist or communist, so anti-communist movement, pro-Islamic movement, where the Saudi played a major role in this affairs. So we have seen the transformation of this. I may be putting slides which must have nothing to do with my talk, because it has been put in different way. I have to transfer it to my laptop. But having said that, these are all related to two different issues where we have to see the development and different phases that have taken place. So if we look at West Asia, we mean to say it is the Mashriq al-Arabi, which is considered to be the Mesopotamia area, and the North African state, which is also part of the Arab world, where we're looking at it as an ummah of al-Arab, which is jointly from Morocco into Qatar. That was the stretch of the territory, the geopolitical importance of this, and the discovery of gas and oil, and the dominance of Israel in the region was the prime objectives for the colonial powers and the French and the British, and then later on by the United States, where we have seen and whatever is developing in these bases have been happening. And then we could see that the Saudis' money was established not for the Islamic serving of the Islamic world, rather it has been established to serve the American agenda and the colonial power agenda. So the Saudi have been distributing money all over the world to support all this movement of Takfiri and jihadist group, which we have noticed. If you know, this is what I've tried to give the slides of the picture to show you the sorts of democracy that they have tried to promote, whether it was into Iraq. We could see Iraq before the democracy, and then Iraq post-democracy after the American and the British invasion of Iraq. Similar fashion, it happened to Libya, same thing happened to Syria, and not to speak less than what's happening in Yemen till date, and the world has forgotten what's happening, daily wars in that part of the Arab world. So there was a promotion of the political Islam by the American in the Arab world. That's what have started all this problem. The moment they link the religion to the governing bodies, it has led to all this kind of disarray and anarchy in the Arab world, because the moment the Islamic and the sedition movement started, so we could see there is a huge division in the Arab world because of these sort of movement have taken place. in the Arab world, and which have really hindered its development. In fact, why? Because the Arab masses were the 30 million labor class. In fact, after the post independent and in 1946 onward. But until 2000, we have seen that there have become 100 million labor working in the Arab world, but there is no infrastructure, there is no industry, so there is no building of a state, any kind of a complete state in any of the Arab countries completely. Therefore, this mass of movement has become a force to reckon with, but it has turned its gun against the different government, unsuccessful government of the Arab world, where we landed in what is known as the Arab Spring in 2011. So we, after the invasion of Afghanistan and Al Qaeda formation, then we have seen the Al Qaeda arise in the Syria and in Iraq and in the Maghreb, in Morocco, in Yemen, and in Somalia, and all this part of the world, because most of the Arab Afghan have moved up to this. So after the American invasion of Iraq, we have seen the arising of the establishment of what is called the ISIS, which is the other side of the coin of the terrorist organization Al Qaeda, because they had the same objective, they have the same doctrine, they had the same curriculum from the Saudi Wahhabi books. So they had been teaching and spreading the terror all over the region. And if you see from their map of looking at the world as the new Khalifa states, you can see how much they are keeping in their Khorasan state on their mind, and how they wanted to divide this Arab world into different country. And I think there is. This is. I put some of the slide to show the terrorist link, hypocrisy of the West, by showing an American ambassador to Damascus sitting with the Free Syrian Army, which is formed by the American, and then the Free Syrian Army is standing with Al Nusra group, which is a terrorist organization, and the same Al Nusra group become with Al Qaeda group. So there is no opposition as such, and most of those mercenaries who were working inside Syria, you can see them now in Europe. And you can see from the picture, most of them were holding guns inside Syria and Iraq, and now in Europe they are dressing in the Western clothes, and that is where the danger lies, where most of these terrorists have been smuggled along with the immigrants to be used by the Turkish government in the future plan, in the regaining what Erdogan, the president of Turkey, think that he may gain is the Ottoman Empire, and he is depending on all these mercenaries to reach his objective. So therefore, the American foreign policy in the region was based on the regime change policy. That's the fact of the matter. When President Donald Trump came to power, he said, I wanted to change this policy of the United States from the regime change and into a different source of, he wanted to stop it, and he wanted to pull back all the American forces. And we have seen since he had come, he also being dragged into attacking countries. And in fact, he came back to the square one, where the same policy has been following and has been attacking countries in the pretext of the fighting terrorism. This is how the Arab League importance, where it was created by the British in 1947, and it has come into existence with the main Arab countries, with Syria, with Egypt, to Algeria, Libya. All these socialist countries have taken over, and the Arab League as they establish it. And after which now the Arab League.
Yes, sir. Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes, sir. Could you just repeat the last slide, sir?
Do you hear?
I think there was a small disruption. You're talking about Arab League.
Okay. Yeah, I was talking about the Arab League establishment by the British, who encouraged the nationalist movement in the Arab world, because we were one unified Arab country, but they wanted to give that this part of the world is not a homogeneous, it is a heterogeneous, and there are minorities living within the Arab world. So therefore, they created Arab League, where Arab League was dominated by Egypt, Syria, Libya, Algeria, most of the socialist country, Iraq. They were the main establishing forces behind the establishing of the Arab League. So this Arab League played a major role in unifying Arab position in the region, but ultimately it landed up in the hand of the Saudi Arabia and the Gulf country, which have played a major role, Qatar and Saudi Arabia, in sabotaging the Arab movement, where they allowed the interference in Iraq, allowed the interference of foreign power in Syria, in Libya, in Yemen. So name it, and it has been there. So it's become a dividing forces rather than a unifying one. So these are all the development have taken shape in the Middle East and Arab, and the terrorist industry have been created in the Arab states, and that is why it is a part of clean and break policy of 1996, which was established by the United States newcons that time, and Richard Burns and his 6 groups of intellectuals who have written it to the United States and adopted by the American administration, which has been established. Everybody knows those facts. My talk here is just to show that terrorism has been used as a tool for political objectives, and it has been taken everywhere. Whenever the Americans go, the terrorist organization follow them, and they have been implemented. Now we have seen it in Iraq, in Afghanistan. We have seen it in Syria. We have seen it in Yemen, in Libya, in Iraq. It is all part of the same game plan they have been playing against this part of the world, because they don't want to see the Arab world united again, where we tried to unite throughout history, but we failed. And now we are going to have failed miserably again, because there is a sedition movement. And this sedition movement now, it's building up. There is a bloc formation. There is a bloc which is we call the anti-American hegemony in the region bloc, which comes from Iran to Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Palestine. And on the other side, there is the surrender bloc, or the American bloc, which is led by Israel, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and now Sudan will join, and the rest of the Arab Gulf country, which will be an anti-Iranian bloc, because the next phase of the inter-fightings and the war zone should be created. It will be an anti-Iranian bloc, where they are taking advantage and deviating our attention from the Palestinian cause, and there will be more of a trouble in the region. So this is how we have been facing either a civil war, or either we have been led by a government which is the stooge of the American and the Western power, rather than serving the people of the region. This is our suffering of the Syria, and how Afghanistan was looking prior to 1969 Afghanistan, and now you can see in Syria 2008 and 2013 now is the same damage and destruction of this civilization is been happening. Our main cause is actually because mixing of religion in politics have led all this anarchy. I don't want to blame the West for this major events happening place. Actually, we take the major blame ourselves for allowing the West to sabotage and destabilize this region. And we have never had a leader who have the vision, who have been able to unify most of the Arab world, who can be inspiring the mass to lead the mass into a unified Arab position, so we can play a major role in the global affairs. We have been sidelined throughout the 20th century, and now we are more a divided house, more of interfighting, and we are also under the verge of more collapsing and division. So we do not see any bright future currently in this part of the world where we are suffering. So this is how they are driving us back into the Middle Age, bringing back the terrorist organization, because we failed as an Arab country to change from a feudal community or a society into a civilian society. And now with this development, with the atrocity, with the austerity measure, with the economic collapse, we are coming back. We are coming back to the Middle Age. We are coming back to this tribal law, where it is prevailed more than the civilian, more than the state building system, which have failed us, and the democratic process have failed in most of the Arab countries, because we have not built up the pillars and the institution to support our democracy system like any other country, like India, like the rest of the world. And we were unable to copy, even with the Western world, their system of having their democracy and upholding the values of human rights and expression. It is a totally different system, and each country have its own. We have from Republican, we have from the socialist, we have from the dictatorialships, we have from the monarchy. So every system is in the Arab world, and everywhere it's a divided house. So IS, everybody knows who have created IS. Even Hillary Clinton said it. Even President Trump himself said it, that the American, and they have made IS. And you can see, decode it for yourself. you can see the Japanese trucks, you can see the American weapons, you can see the British, you can see the French, you can see the German. Everybody contributed to their existence. So an eye opener that terrorism has been a tool rather than it created the menace and the instability in this part of the world. I think we have. Are you still hearing me? There is some problem with your net.
So I can hear you perfectly, sir. You can
Sorry,
go ahead,
I
sir.
am okay. The slides is taking slightly longer. Okay, now I think okay. I'll speak in 5 minutes. We spoke of the past, the current, the contemporary. Now, what could be really the future of the region? There are many things to see the future of this part of the world. There are two issues, which is the discovery of gas and oil in the Mediterranean, where we will see more of a play of the Turkish, which is the Turkey under Erdogan, President Erdogan trying to establish himself as the new Khalifa, riding on the Arab because of the religion. He wanted to revive the what we call the Islamic Ummah under his umbrella so he can take full advantage. And he is just playing the American card in the region against the Arabs, against the Muslim country, and even against Europe, because Europe has to pay the price because they have challenged the dollars, and petrodollars have been dominant in in the world affairs, financial affairs, and they cannot. So in the long run, it is against he is playing the card against even European Union. So I think by cutting the pipelines from the Mediterranean into European, it is a plan, sinister plan to destabilize Europe, to cause more pressure on Europe to go and buy the American gas and oil and be again part of the American strategy against Russia, against the rising China, which is a big challenge in the wider perspective of the American foreign policy in the region. And Erdogan, we don't have to say, Erdogan has been the promoter of all the terrorist organization. He opened the infrastructure of Turkey and he spread it all along. He stick all the Syrian refugees into his own country. He tried to blackmail the European. He smuggled along with them most of the terrorists whom he have taken mercenaries, more than 20,000 Syrian into Libya. So you can see the spread of terrorism from where it is coming, and addressing terrorist state-sponsored terrorism have not taken place because he has a role to play, and that is why they are supporting him and keeping a close eye on his activities and fighting against all his neighbors. Zero problem with neighbor to all problem with everybody. And you know that this is the next step, what could be the next future for the fighting in the Mediterranean or in the Arab countries, what will happen with Turkey taking the lead in most of these developments. And I wanted just to give you a simple example why IS have released. These are the hostage, the consulate in Mosul when they took over by IS. You can see these are most of the employees, along with the foreign minister at that time, David Oglo, where there was not a single scratch on any of them, which means they have been released unharmed by ISIS. While we know this is what ISIS, I'm sorry to show this picture. They decapitated the head of the Syrian and the Iraqis, and they paraded on the street. That is what the ISIS. Why they saved the Turkish? That's for your people to answer what they are planning for the future of this. This is our mercenaries from all over the world. They have collected people from Chechnya. They have collected people from Uyghur, China. They have collected people from Afghanistan, Pakistan, name it. We had 113 countries participated in the ISIS organization, the terrorist organization, and they have been part of fighting against a unified Syrian army. So the way to stop the stability in the Arab world and in the Asia and Middle East, West Asia, is in fact to stop supporting terrorism. So we were going to see new battle zone. There will be rise of terrorism again in Afghanistan, Pakistan. There will be more of blocks against peace in the region, one by the Israeli, one by the Iranian. And then the normalization of Palestine, of relation with Israel, definitely on the card. We have seen is now Bahrain has come after UAE. Tomorrow will be Mauritania, then it will be Sudan. It is all because of the pressure from the American president on these countries to normalize the relation, but no Palestinian state. So therefore, the ultimatum goal for all these forces is to see a Sunni Shia fight. That's the minimum. the ultimate objective. So to end seditions, you need to cut out Wahhabism from all over, because it is the menace, it is the creating of all the terrorist organization, and it has been the hub of all terrorist activity all over the world. So let us see if this development in the next future, and I will leave the floor open for the question and answer, so I can take from here all this your answer. Thank you very much for being patient with me for this presentation.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. It was really enlightening, and we believe that it is a feast of knowledge for all our attendants today, and also for all those who are going to watch it in 1 hour from now when we post it on all the sites. And so, before, I'd like to tell all the people who are live with us today that they can post their questions in the comment box, or they can unmute themselves and ask a question. I'd like to start with a few questions of my own. So you mentioned about how Turkey has gone ahead, and it was like the gateway for ISIS into Syria and many of these regions. So could you elaborate and explain to us how it actually planned with it and why it went scot-free?
See, basically, Turkey is a neighbor of Syria. Our whole northern part is with Turkey. Turkey have been defeated in the First World War, and that is why Turkey have ruled the Arab world under the Islamic way, saying that this is Islam, and there have been 500 years suppressed under the Turkish Empire, where we have not seen any activity of the Arab in any academia and any institution and any education except in the Islamic education, where we were unable to support. So when they have failed us and they have destroyed and suppressed the Arab world, they have given us to the Western colonial power on a platter, where we have been also used and utilized fully by the French and the British occupation. Now Turkey under Erdogan, where he realized that the dream of the bringing back this Ummah or the Khalifa project of Ottoman Empire is by only the Islamic way. So he removed Erbakan from the ruling of his party, and he took over of the Justice and Development Party, which has been active since 2001. So what he did in raising the Arab Spring with the Muslim Brotherhood in 2011, it was all his idea with the Muslim Brotherhood and also with the United States, that we should remove most of the Arab regime, replace it with a regime which is more friendly to the West and to the United States, and also where the Muslim Brotherhood will take over. So we could see the changes taking place in Egypt, we could see the changes taking place in Tunisia, but ultimately Libya have turned into a hub of terrorism, and now he is himself trying to have the dominance role in this part of the world, claiming that this is part of the empire of Turkey, where we have seen that he has thinking in his own language, that wherever the Turk goes, his eyes light, it will go there. So he turned out to be the Pakistan in the making, when he opened the infrastructure of terrorism inside his territory, allowed all the mercenaries to come from all over the world. And everybody you know who came from England, from France, Belgium, name it, and they have come through Turkey, and they were smuggled into Syria, trained, equipped, and then brainwashed, and then they sent them into the territory of Syria and Iraq. So he has tried to play this card, where he destroyed the governments of this country, and the pretext that these are, suppressing their people, and using the religion as the sentiments of the public. And being a large country, being a huge population with a big army, member of the NATO, he is now going to play a major role in also continue this policy of aggressions, continue this policy of destabilization, because now the next level of confrontation will go between him and between the Egyptian and between the Turkish project in the region, which is they have, and the Israeli project, and there is a European project, there is Iranian project. So every country, all the regional players, including Turkey, which is a major one, having a project, and everybody wanted that project to serve on their own. And Erdogan is digging his own graveyard, by the way, because in terms of the political, no way that Erdogan can be allowed to remain that dominant and bring back all this empire of the Ottoman again. He will be brought down. So he does not realize that he's been used for a temporary period, where he'll be removed like many other of the dictators who have been ruling the Arab world and when their job is over, they have been removed.
Yes, sir. And so you spoke of Richard and the five intellectuals. I couldn't actually understand that part. Could you elaborate about that? Richard, someone, and the five intellectuals who came ahead with the plan of sorts.
Well, when we were under the occupation of Turkey, under the umbrella of Islamic umbrella, which they call it the Ottoman period, most of the Arab the intellectuals were not allowed to take part in the ruling and the governance of the Turk. It was mostly Turk. So most of the Arab were suppressed or they were jailed, were sidelined. We didn't have any of the, throughout 500 years, give me something that the Arab have contributed under the Turkish dynasty. We have not been able to contribute anything. So most of our contribution, I went back to my first slide, because we contributed through civilization throughout previous history. But because of the political Islam, we are unable to progress because of they have linked religion with the governance. Like in Europe, they have divided the house. They fought for 300 years. There was a war for 30 years. 1618 started 1648 in. It was the war on. Why? Because there was a fighting in the. So they decided to separate religion from the government. There we had the suffering. They encourage now, the European and the American have encouraged Islam in ruling in the governance, which means they want to destroy rather than help us.
Yes, sir. Do any of our audiences want to ask a question? Gaurav, Yaya, Krishna, or Jay? You can just unmute yourselves, or you can leave a comment in the chat box, and we'll take it from there. So just let us know anytime you want to. So, sir, I'll go ahead with my next question. You mentioned about how Arab League is being broken from inside, in the sense
Yeah.
that there was the socialist group, which had among themselves Libya, Syria, Iraq, who used to have leadership, but with rise of wealth, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and some other countries today have more power, and in a way they are breaking it from inside, or something along those lines. Could you explain
Yeah.
us how the GCC countries have today moved the power balance in their favor, and how the earlier countries such as Syria, Egypt, Libya, who at a time used to hold most of the power in Arab League, how they have receded, and how this new crop of nations has taken over?
Yeah, see, after the post-independent period, after the Second World War, we have seen what we call the Pan-Arabism movement and Nasserism. Jamal Abdel Nasser was one of the leader of the Islamic Egypt. He was the president of Egypt, right? So I had a wave of support throughout the Arab countries. And because that time Israel have taken over the Palestinian, and there was an attack by 1956 by that trio, France, Britain and Israel on Egypt, because they have nationalized the Sinai, canal. And that time, the Arab were behind Egypt, so there was a huge movement. And the Arab League, whenever they used to make decisions, everybody used to abide. Like, for example, peace with Israel. It was throughout that period that only peace with Israel possible when there will be a two-state solution where there will be coexisting Palestinian and Israeli state together, and based on the UN Security Council resolution 242338 and the right of return of Palestinian refugees back into their homeland. That was the basic. So nobody could even that. There was no boycott, and they were boycott for Israeli in the region, and everybody was following that. Gradually, when Camp David has come, Sadat took over from the Abdel Nasser, and immediately he went into the Camp David agreement with Israel, signed a peace agreement, and then he was kicked out of the Arab League. So you can imagine the strength of the Arab League, that any country violate, even the founding member, Egypt, was removed from the Arab League, and it was shifted to Tunisia because they said this is a pan-Arab stand. And then followed after that, we had seen that there was 1991, we had the Gulf War, second Gulf War, where the Americans have liberated Kuwait from the invasion of Iraq. And they promised the Arab to have an Oslo agreement where they have taken the Arab altogether, all the Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Palestinian, into discussion with Israel on Madrid conference, and as known. And we could not reach an agreement because Arafat was the Palestinian leader, had made the separate Oslo agreement with the Israelis, followed by the Jordanian. So after that, 1992, and we have seen that most of the Arab League gradually losing its influence in the Arab world, with the emergence of the Gulf countries also, where they have seen the Gulf start rising and they had the money and the money in their hand. When we say you have the capital, you have the political will. So they have been bribing people and forcing them to fall in the line of the American dictation. So most of this period have gradually weathered, and then we have seen that they have dragged us into more of interfighting among the Arab. Instead of having only one problem of Palestine, we had more problems. We had Yemen war, we had Sudan divided, we have Iraq war, we had Syrian war, and then we had the Arab Spring. So all this have weakened the Arab structure, where the Gulf countries started playing, especially the Saudis and the Qataris, played a major role in dictating what the American and the West wanted from the Arab League. So that's how we have lost our influence in this. And I'm sure now, can you imagine that the Palestinian apply for the Arab League, that they wanted to have a discussion on their own cause and on normalization of relation. Bahrain and Emirates rejected for the first time. So what does it mean? That means the Arab League has no value anymore, and their decision have no value. 2002, we had the King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia came with the Arab initiatives in Beirut, have given that there could be a peace between Israel and the Arab world, provided Israel give a land to the Palestinian, their homeland, and at least have a two coexisting state. I mean, two-state solution. And Israel rejected that plan, and therefore now, when we see most of the Arab country falling, that means this plan is dead, and we will see more of a trouble ahead for the Arab League. And I'm not sure if the Arab League really, most of the country will pull out after they have condemned some of the country, the last decision taken by the Arab, rejecting the Palestinian request.
Thank you so much, sir. And Yaya has asked the question, UAE and Bahrain have welcomed and recognized Israel. Will other Arab states follow?
I said, see, the initiative was peace for land. Now they are asking you normalize relation only for no Palestine, no peace. A peace according to Israeli. What is peace according to Israeli dictation? Which means that there is no Palestinian state. They want to kick the Palestinian into Jordan, and they say this is their alternative home. Maybe tomorrow they will say, after this Jordan, they will say, okay, go to Iraq. There is no more Palestinian allowed. So there is a plan. It is a systematically annihilation of Palestine throughout history. I mean, we could see it happening. So if UAE or Bahrain normalize relation, what is the peace deal between them? Are they at war with Israel? Did they fight, by the way? Did they send their army? Was there any truce? No. They were part of the unified Arab position to support the Palestinian cause. What you have done now is a unilateral decision violating the Arab League charter and against the Arab Palestinian will. So there is maybe other Arab country fall because, and this is a very important, none of these countries have the parameters of a full independent state. There is no state here. There are only countries created post-colonial to make countries within this small region into small region, and they will fall apart. Because if Egypt, with all its strength, after 1978-79 accord with the Camp David, are unable to full normalization with Israel, or Jordanian, or the Palestinian, they fail to make full normalization. What you could be next for you? So if you are unable to read the future of your stability, because you think by joining with Israel, your anti-Iranian bloc is stronger and you will get your security, that's wrong. The security of the Arab countries is only within the Arabs, within the structure of the Arab security order, not from other countries can provide it. And there where our support is. Unless and until we awake all our Arabs to the cause, to the danger, to the challenges we are facing in the future, we will fall by one against our will, against the will of the people of the region and the aspiration of everybody to live in peace and harmony.
Thank you so much, sir. And Gaurav has asked a few questions. I'll unmute him so that he can ask you directly. Gaurav, I'm unmuting
Sure.
you. You can ask the question.
Hello, Dr. Awwad. This is very nicely presented, and thank you for enlightening us. My first question is regarding what you have just answered. Uh, these days, newer and newer Arab countries are coming up and recognizing Israel. And is it likely alliance that US is trying to settle with Israel and its long-time enemy Arab friends for a likely future war against Iran in Trump 2.0? That is my first question. And can you please also enlighten us about the historical events that have led to division of the Kurd population amongst
Okay.
Iraq, Iran, Turkey, and Syria? And what is the likely prospect of free Kurdish state in the near future? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Yes, Gaurav, I think first one, I have answered the question that there are two blocks in the region. We call it, one is the anti-American hegemony, which is linked from Iran to Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, where Hamas and the Palestinian now are in the same line with the anti-resistance to American and Israeli hegemony. So there is a plan to divide the Arab world more into, disintegrate it into more countries, and that's where it's happening, and it's going to happen if we don't understand and we take a unified position. The second block, which is now building up, is we know that the American have joined, is the Israelis, is with the UAE and Bahrain, and to Saudi Arabia will follow. Egypt already there. Sudan will come. So any conflict in the world, it's a conflict of interest. It's economical. It's a competition. There is an oil and gas in the region. Beirut blast have blown up the port of Beirut. You saw that picture. Now Haifa port is being developed. What could be the next? Haifa port will be the Israel beneficiary. All the shipment will take place from Europe, will come to Israel, and then it will be throughout the pipelines or the diplomatic routes, I am calling it, throughout the Arab countries into even India and China. So there is an alternative route which is being created to benefit only Israel. And also, there are pipelines from the gas discovered in the Mediterranean from Israel for Lebanon. Israel wanted to get the gas from their shore into Europe, where the UAE is going to finance these pipelines. So, there is an interest of promoting the prosperity of Israel at the cost of the Arab money. Even Prime Minister Netanyahu was saying, with the Israeli brain and the Arab money. For God's sake, then we don't have a brain, we only have a sack of dollars. How you see us, a sack of barrel of oil? That is ridiculous. That's how they are seeing the Arab Gulf country is only a sack of dollars, and they are naive. If you do not understand how others see you, you will fall trapped. So there is a block definitely building up because America foreign policy, and as the Americans said, America create a monster outside America, and they go and say we have to kill that monster. They have been doing it. They had the chronology of foreign intervention in 94 countries all over the world throughout their history of existence. Now they are giving upper hand in this region to Israel because Israel now is a strong militarily, politically, economically. So once this Arab country fall on the line of the Israelis, definitely there is a monster created which called Iran. And if we look at the history of Iran in the region, I don't think 300 years, for the last 300 years, Iran have invaded any neighbors. So who is causing the trouble? Is it the American presence or the Iranian presence? Iranian are neighbors. Iranian are bordering the Arab world. We need to live with neighbors. You cannot fight. You cannot create a problem. You cannot, thousands of miles away, you say this is a monster. There is no question. It was a monster. It was your 12th largest army in the world when the Shah was a friendly with the American. The moment the Iranian revolution changed, 1979, the American had an anti-Iranian foreign policy. Why? Because they lost a huge market. So therefore, they wanted Iran to succumb to the pressure, to come to the American terms and open their economy and oil to the American companies. So therefore, that fight is on with both the sides. So this alliance has been created. I talked of the Kurd. I did not mention the Kurd because we consider the Kurd as part of the Arab world, and they have been living with us for centuries. And there, when the Ottoman Empire were under the Ottoman Empire, they were spread like many of the tribes and the Arab world. Many of the nationalities, minorities lived there. They are part in Iran, they are part in Syria, they have part in Iraq, and they are 30% of them are in Turkey. So they have been, the only problem for the Kurds is that they're inlocked. They don't have access to the sea, so therefore it will be not viable. And they have been used throughout history, by the way, by the American, by the British, by the Iranian, by the Turk, everybody, even by Saddam Hussein, everybody used the Kurd, promising them a homeland if they join hand against their adversary. So they have failed to protect their interest or give an equal opportunity for minorities, not only the Kurd, but rest of the Arab countries. So the Kurd, my own perception of this, I would say, their survival is to survive with us, to live with us. You cannot have a separate state. It's impossible. They will not allow you even to have a separate state. They are stealing the oil. They are selling it at the cheapest rate. Iraqi oil costs 1 cent, 10 cents to extract 1 barrel of oil. You can imagine how much money they are making out of the Iraqi oil, which have the largest reservoir of oil on the world. So therefore, you looting the wealth, promising, giving false promise, you are unable to reach anywhere. So neither Iran will agree, nor Iraq will agree, nor Turkey will agree for any state of independent Kurd state, because we know that this will be major portion of those countries will be chopped off to create a Kurdistan where they have been promised. But I would say there is a dream difficult to fulfill, but it's only when there is a settlement in this part of the world we can have an equal opportunity and distribution of the wealth. I don't think anybody wanted to divide and divide more this part of the world. We have suffered enough, but I am sure that I am a little pessimistic on the future.